Hey, what's up, Hognose Pods? Thanks for coming and hanging out with us this evening. One of our really cool interviews. I've got a special guest all the way from outside the States. I'm really pleased to have Bree Romans hanging out with us from Bree's Exotics. Bree, do you want to give us a real quick rundown of your business name and how you came up with it?
Hi, everyone. My name is Bree, as Kevin has already said. This is actually my first podcast, so thank you so much for having me on. So I go by Bree's Exotics, and my partner is Mike Taitula with Alpha Reptile, and together we actually are the Jungle Vault, and it is a bit of a unique name. So what it actually originated from was Mike used to have this idea that he wanted to start his own podcast. And when we were trying to think of a business name, we had his logo. He actually had a logo done up for this podcast, and it was actually called the Reptile Vault. And I really enjoyed the name of it, and I loved the logo he had, which was a kind of like a gecko hand holding a microphone. And he was really looking forward to doing the podcast and etc. So I thought it was fantastic, and I kind of wanted to find a name that would kind of tie into his podcast idea so that we could still kind of keep that idea alive and in the future maybe start that podcast. So the main thing we wanted to focus on is to not actually have a name that had exotics or reptiles in it at all, which I guess in our community is kind of different. We wanted to have something that was very unique, would kind of stand out in a crowd, and also kind of not center exclusively around just reptiles and not exotics, because kind of in a business way, especially in, I guess, Canada, maybe the US now as well with all the US ARC stuff, things like the word exotics and reptiles on paper may have some negative connotations as far as businesses are concerned. So we wanted to keep that kind of out away from people in the niche community. So if you're not in our community, I don't really want people to know what we do. Not everyone is a big fan of snakes, so seeing reptiles on paper can kind of freak people out. So we also do custom vivariums, custom terrariums, and live plant sales. So having a name like the Jungle Vault kind of brings that live jungly feel into our business. And the vault feeling, kind of everything's tucked away in a vault, and that's kind of how it evolved.
I like it. That's so cool. Yeah, it's interesting here too. You know, I lay pretty low, at least locally. I mean, we don't even have a reptile show here. Our town is 330,000 people, and there's not a reptile show here, which is, seems kind of crazy, but it's just a general idea. There's a pocket of us that like snakes, but so I'm just saying all that to say I really understand where you're coming from with it, but I think it's a great concept.
Yeah, it was super important to us when we were thinking about things. Canada doesn't really have a US ARC. Things are kind of going down the drain here as we speak. And when we apply to certain things for our business, we just don't want people to know that our business is centered around something like the word exotic or reptiles, just out of fear that that would kind of put us on the radar and make us a target, especially just due to all the negative connotations that may have. And I think it's honestly worth some people considering just for future, and anyone thinking about future business names. I think it is worth considering just how people outside the community may look inside.
Yeah, no, I get that. I definitely get that. And that's just a great perspective and something to think about. Like you said, it's almost a nuance. It's not, back in the 90s, everybody wanted everybody else to know that they had giant worms and retics in their house or rhino vipers or whatever. Now it's like,
back then nobody cares, but now it's a big deal. If you do, damn if you don't.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's some things are better left to your community who you feel safe with, and then the rest, they don't need to know.
Absolutely. Totally agree. And for question number 2, and we've talked a little bit about that before this cast, but your focal species obviously is multi-species. You have hognose too, but what are some of your, current or former species? Maybe some that you really love or some that you currently work with?
So in both the past and present, I've worked with quite a large range of both common and unique species. And of course, I do have my partner, Mike, who's brought his own animals into my life. And that's allowed me to also become familiar with other species, especially because he's a huge fan of dart frogs. So we've got a lot of dart frogs here. They're not my thing, but I'm slowly learning to kind of understand them as well. But as far as like snakes are concerned, which I'm sure what most people are into here, I have a massive thing for colubrids. I've never really been into pythons, although we do have a savu python, or Liasis savuensis. And I'm quite fond of him. He's got a bit of an attitude, and he will bite anything that moves. But honestly, I'm quite fond of him as far as pythons are concerned. But colubrids are what really get me excited. So currently right now I have slightly over 30 hognose. I got one, and like everyone, you kind of get one and you're screwed. So
Yep.
The hognose have really done it for me. I'm obsessed with their personality more than anything. I like to say I have really, really smart snakes and I have really, really stupid snakes. And the hognose are my kind of goofballs of the room. They'll never fail to make me laugh with their silly antics. But I also currently work with and produce Boega nidriceps or nigriceps, and that is the black-headed cat snakes.
Cool.
They're super cool and important to me because they're a species that is almost exclusively wild-caught. And unlike the very common mangrove snake that everybody knows, the big flashy black and yellow, always on posters, these guys are a lot more uncommon. And if I say the name, you probably don't even know what I'm talking about. But they are a lot smaller, they're a lot calmer, and they have this amazing variability from dark purples all the way to amazing brilliant reds to watermelon colors. And I love the variability on them. The size is more tolerable than an 8-foot Boega. But they're really cool as far as cat snakes are concerned. And I also have an ongoing project with Goniosoma oxycephalum, and that is the red-tailed green rat snake. And quite honestly, next to hognoses, that's probably my favorite species of snake. They are so incredibly personable and active and intelligent. I'm kind of smitten with them. They're also another species that's majorly wild-caught. I'm trying to think of a couple people breeding them, but there's not many. And I'm working on a breeding loan with one of my males and hoping to get a few more in to kind of work on producing that species a little bit more in captivity because they make such amazing display snakes. And then I also have an ongoing project with the western shovel-nosed snake, a very small diminutive colubrid from North America in the western states. And these are just small little insect-eating little snakes that are kind of underrated, and I think would honestly make the number one best beginner snake ever if we can produce them and make them more reliable, which I seem to see a lot of interest. So hoping to be successful with that.
That's so awesome. And then you mentioned having a lot of hogs. What's your favorite hognose morph and why?
That's a pretty easy one, despite there being so many these days. Moonstone and Moonbeam, hands down.
Very cool.
It's not the most fancy as far as the genetics are concerned, but honestly, I find it's hard to beat that silvery purple and the dark eyes on the Moonbeam hogs. Honestly, when I first got into hogs, I got the Honda Hognose, and she was het albino, so I got an albino male to pair with her. And after that, I spent a long time looking through hognose pictures and scrolling and deciding what my next project would be. Actually spent quite a bit of time looking through things, trying to decide what I wanted to do. And the one thing that stood out to me was the moonbeams and the moonstone hognose. And of course, I couldn't afford them. So I made it my sole purpose to make my own, which of course I think no one should check that off their list. You don't need to buy your way into what you want. You can make it. And honestly, the reward is so much better.
That's right. Yep.
And just last season, I produced one moonstone, and I'm pretty darn happy about that.
Heck yeah, that's a milestone. That's awesome.
The female ate more than half her clutch, but she left me one egg that produced a moonstone, and I think that was a win.
That is a big time win. Those are fantastic gambling odds right there.
Yeah, it's the little things. She ate most of the clutch, but out of the 5 eggs, I got one moonstone, and I'm pretty happy about it.
I wonder what it is with that bloodline. Of all the egg eaters that I've ever had, it's always been lavender line stuff and combos.
I swear that snake would eat a sock. Like, I know the one snake that would possibly ever eat a male. That's going to be her. Yeah, the rest of mine are so good. They're great eaters, but they've never once touched the eggs. But yeah, that one lavender female will absolutely eat anything that goes in front of her face.
Well, that's cool. That's really good. So, question number 4. Any frustrations about the Hognose community? And this could be the market. It could be, other individuals. It could be the species, could be anything. Any frustrations? And then maybe ways that you're going about resolving that or contributing to the betterment of the hobby. Any thoughts on that question?
So I've given this one a bit of a thought. And honestly, as far as communities go, I find the Hognose community is actually pretty good. It's fairly welcoming, and especially when you compare it to certain communities like the crested gecko community, which I have no shame in naming directly. It's considerably less full of a lot of the cattiness and the drama, and it seems to be just a lot of people who are here for a good time and just genuinely love hognoses. However, there are 2 things I think that bug me big time, because it is still a rapidly growing community, and it's growing big and it's growing pretty fast, especially in the last couple of years, 3 years or so. I've seen it increasing pretty quickly. Now, whether that's just newbies getting their very first snake because hognoses make fantastic first snakes, or that's other people transitioning from markets that are overflowing, like ball pythons, because they see the potential in the morph game, which, of course, with anything with morphs, there are going to be people who see potential in the morphs versus the species and are there for the money and not necessarily the enjoyment and love of the animal itself, which is an unfortunate reality.
Right.
So one of the biggest things, especially from, I would say, people coming from communities like the ball python community, is treating hognose like they are ball pythons, which you will get with a lot of overfeeding, incorrect feeding, serious obesity, and kind of also sending out babies that are not ready to go, either have had a couple meals or only eaten live, and just setting beginners up on the wrong foot with purchasing a baby that isn't ready and should not have been sold, which I'm seeing a lot of, and it's really unfortunate to get people so new into this, purchasing a baby that's 6 grams and has eaten 2 meals with the breeder and they thought that was ready to go. It's just not right. Or I guess what really gets me going is just the power feeding, thinking you need to have these big, beefy 800 gram, 900 gram females to produce massive clutches, feeding them rabbits and rats 6 days, every 6 days, feed them a rat, feed them a rabbit, get them nice and fat, and they'll produce better clutches for you. It's just not necessary. Like, the ball python mentality, I guess, kind of takes over in that sense. And then I guess another thing I see a lot of is kind of discouraging other people from wanting to try variety. unlike a lot of the pythons and other stuff people are familiar with, hognose are happy to consume quite a bit of different food items. I regularly feed mine frog legs, quails, quail chicks, quail eggs, the odd lizard, the odd snake, etc. And they're happy to do so, and by no means does that not mean they're not going to take a rodent again. They will happily do so. I call them the trash cans of the room.
I agree.
And there's this myth that constantly gets spread. If you feed them an egg, they will turn around and eat their own eggs, which is simply just not the case. Or if you feed them a chick, they'll never touch a rodent again, etc., etc. Or that it'll just kill them if you offer them a quail egg one day, and they'll be nutrient deficient for the rest of their life, which also not the case.
Isn't it crazy, the stuff that's peddled out there? It's just wild.
It's just this strange mentality that it's people who haven't actually spent the time to really look into the species and how they are. Hognose in the wild don't just eat rodents. They eat quite a large variety of things, and they do eat rodents, absolutely. But feeding them things like chicks and eggs, I often feed mine gecko dud eggs and whatever else I find, and they're more than happy to take them. But the myth of, if you feed them an egg, they'll turn around and eat their own eggs is simply just not true, because how would they survive in the wild if that was the case?
That's right.
I know I share photos regularly of my hognose eating kind of unorthodox prey items and tend to get a lot of backlash for doing so. But I'll continue to share them because I think it's important for people to see that it is possible and it is okay. It's just not what everybody else does, and it's not the norm. And if other people don't want to do that, that's okay.
That's right.
You can absolutely feed rodents to your hognose every single day of its entire life, and it will be fine. There's no reason that we should be shaming someone who wants to offer their hognose a quail egg once every blue moon. So I think that's a huge pet peeve of mine.
Yeah, and I concur with you, kind of on that point. And I've, through the years, I've been doing hognose for 29 years this year, I think. And, we fed them all kinds of stuff just because it's curious. And everything from toads to boiled eggs to, like you said, quail chicks to, bird eggs or like nestling birds that fall out of the nest. All kinds of stuff. And like you said, they'll eat just about anything. And so, yeah, I really don't have a problem with the variety. Some people are just real sticklers about that. But I think
Yes, they're super opportunistic feeders.
Yeah.
And the funniest thing about hognose is they can actually eat pretty large prey items for their size, which is, I guess, pretty unique to them, and it's hilarious to see it. And some people may not be familiar with that capability as well.
True.
Because I know even like certain species, like my Thai bamboo rat snake, may be this exact same size as one of my female hogs, but she absolutely will never be able to eat the same size meal that my female hognose can eat. It's just not everything is built the exact same way. So I think it's important that they're treated as such.
Yeah.
And not everyone applies, well, it's exactly like this species kind of mentality to a certain animal.
Yeah, I agree. Have you explored any feeding organ meats to hognose?
Yeah, absolutely. I regularly get chicken hearts, gizzards, livers, pretty much any organs that I pick up at the butcher when I go grocery shopping that I see. I often provide those to my other snakes as well. My Goniosoma actually goes nuts for chicken hearts. So it's not like rare. Like I can give them to other species of snakes as well, and they'll happily take another prey item right after that, and they'll eat a rodent right after that. My king snakes, happy to eat chicks and livers and all kinds of other things. They'll eat geckos and lizards and frogs and all kinds of other stuff, and they'll still eat mice.
Yeah, I agree with you
So it's
100%
just a
there.
strange myth that if you give them anything else, they'll never touch a mouse again. And we scare people away from it so badly that they won't even try. And I just think that's kind of unfair.
Well, and the other element of it too, is kind of exploring what species have specific needs. Like obviously, the garter snakes can tolerate more of the thiamine in the diet, which is like from a fish only diet. Whereas a hognose, you feed it too much thiamine, it's not great for it. Long term,
Oh,
they just
absolutely. So if, I know some people will say, well, my hognose loves salmon and tuna, but while it will eat salmon and tuna, a hognose should not be eating salmon and tuna every day.
right.
It's not something that they should be eating regularly. It's not something that they would encounter in their wild diet. They're not really built to process salmon and tuna, whereas other species can tolerate things a whole lot differently. So it comes back around to every species is completely unique, and it's important to kind of learn more about what you're keeping.
Absolutely.
Before you kind of just dive right into it and follow random care guides that you read on the internet that say, hey, you can feed them this, without thinking a little bit further into it.
Yeah, and it's interesting, I don't know what your experience is with it, but like I did the like beef liver or veal liver, and the females that had laid that year would feed on that with gusto. I mean, would just engulf as much as they could at one time and just, hulk that down. So I don't know if the iron content was something that's depleted at that time. That's where my mind goes. But I just, I think there's some, real huge benefit to offering some of those items, especially when they're at a time where they're depleted, or, some that I've seen straight out of the wild that are emaciated or whatever, salmon, organ meat, stuff that's real rich in, minerals and things are hugely beneficial even in hognose.
Yeah, and I mean, especially I've had great success getting picky eaters to eat liver meats. And another thing for picky hognose, one of the best, most successful things I've ever gotten picky hognose to eat is lizards. Hands down, little lizards have been the best feeder for picky hognoses out of all kinds of other things that I've tried. So it's weird that we would go from something that they're happy to eat as a baby when picky, only to say that no, they can never eat such a thing. It will kill them.
Yeah, I hear you, and that's those are some fantastic points you brought up there, and I guess leads into question number 5 here. What wisdom do you have that you've learned through the years or whatever that you would give yourself if you could go back and talk to yourself as a brand new keeper, especially of hognose snakes?
Honestly, I like to think that I was pretty calculated when I started with hognose. I knew I didn't have a ton of space. I didn't have a ton of money. So I was very specific and did overwhelming amounts of research before beginning. Watched every podcast. I purchased your book. I did everything I could have possibly thought to do before even buying a male for my female. I did what I could to make sure I was pairing the right genetics, and taking good enough care of my current animals. And what my main goal was to do is to be able to produce exactly what I wanted, my exact goals, but with as few snakes as possible. The only thing I maybe would have changed was probably to tell myself to go even slower than I have now, which I think is kind of crazy because I've actually not gone that fast. But I think there's a lot to say about going slow and taking the time to raise animals up from babies, get to know them, get to know their genetics, get to know just what you're doing before rushing out and acquiring as many snakes as you can and throwing them all together. And I think there's a lot of value in just taking your time and doing exactly what you enjoy and not really caring about what everyone else is doing or focusing on what the hottest morph is or what's going to make you the most money. Just what you want at the very end. So yeah, I think that's kind of what I would do if I was to choose, was probably go slower, maybe not pick as many Hognoses out as fast as I did, but it's kind of hard when you're just like, oh, I like that and I like that and I like that. Oh, I'm gonna need that. There's so many awesome snakes from so many awesome people.
That's right.
So it's easy to get lost in quite a lot of them, and you think, oh, well, this could help for this and this could help for this. So I probably would have even shrunk my projects down quite a lot more than they currently are, but I'm actually very happy with where they are right now, and I'm actually not planning to add any more Western Hognoses for, I guess, the next few years, just because I want to focus on what I've collected now and focus on my end projects and end goals with the certain ones I've collected. And I guess that also led me into like my other point with a frustration in the hobby is I've noticed so many people, because it's so new with the morph game, is so many people are collecting such massive amounts of snakes to try and produce the biggest, best morphs as fast as they can, or even just whatever sells. Snows are a big one. Snows are super hot and popular right now. Everyone you talk to, even when I vend expos, everyone comes up and asks if I have snows. The one morph in my collection that you won't see is a snow, simply because of that. It's kind of what everyone has gotten and what everyone will be producing in the next 3 years. And I've taken extra care just not to produce them, because I know the market will be flooded with them. And the ones I've been seeing lately, because everyone was in such a rush to produce them, have all had horrible buggy eyes. Some of them have had, I guess, like cleft lips or I think it's cleft palate is the correct term for it. And just the breeding of the siblings together and continuously inbreeding. I know at my last expo I went to, maybe it was a couple ago, pretty much every hognose for sale was a het snow of some kind. And that just shows how many people kind of went for what's cool versus what they liked, which was super important to me getting started. And I think I'm one of the few people actually working with the lavender gene here in Canada, which has made me happy that I've stuck to my guts and just gone with what I liked versus what's popular.
That's so cool. I really appreciate you coming on today and sharing. And every point you've brought up today, I've really mirrored and can see the benefit. And I really appreciate you taking the time to, think these things through. I mean, that's just, part of my reason for bringing you on is our conversations that we've had in the past about stuff like this. Very thought provoked, and hopefully a lot of the folks that get on here can relate to your perspective. And just for everybody that's listening, make sure to check out the description below. We're going to have all of Bree's links listed out here so that you can find her, and she's on Facebook and on Instagram. She's just a great person. So thanks so much for coming on tonight, Bree. I really appreciate it.
And thank you so much for having me, especially for my first podcast. I know I'm definitely kind of nervous. Maybe you can probably tell in my voice it's a little bit jittery, but definitely really awesome to kind of talk about some of the things that I knew I'd talk about anyway, but cool to talk about them in more of a different setting. But of course, I always like to make sure that I mention the people I owe a lot to getting started, and remind everyone that, success is what you make of it, not what someone else does. And I owe a lot to the people who helped me get started in this hobby. And I just wanted to give the shout out to, Mike Licio at MKL Exotics for really walking me through some rocky years getting started with Hognose, feeding picky babies and stuff. And Jeff Galewood, Tom Creasy, and of course my partner Mike Taitula for kind of being here with me along the way and tolerating the excessive numbers of Hognose in the room.
Thanks again for tuning into the Hognose One podcast. If you're a hog pod or you just want to share with anyone you know, we are offering a discount code for our books via our book printer, Book Baby. So just punch in code 2024 at checkout for any of our Hognose titles. I've got a couple other titles on there you can check out as well.